Good evening, everyone. So my name is Brandon Flood. I will be the moderator this evening. For those of you that aren't familiar with who I am, I wear a number of hats, but in this particular capacity tonight, I'm representing the Capital Region Concerned Citizens Group. So I know a lot of you may have asked, once you've seen that flyer or you've seen the promotions on Facebook, who the heck is the Capital Region Concerned Citizens organization? And for anyone that's on Facebook, kind of what the genesis for this was, anyone that's on Facebook, how many of you are familiar with the Concerned Citizens of Harrisburg page? So for those of you that follow that page, it's pretty robust dialogue. Sometimes, for the most part, it remains civil, but they touch on a lot of subjects involving local government. But so while it's certainly beneficial to have that active dialogue and have people, and it provides an opportunity for people to edify themselves about local government, one of the disadvantages of that page is oftentimes a lot of misinformation is shared. So the one thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to utilize this forum, and these forums are going to be a series of forums. Right now, it's limited to council and the mayor, but we look to have subsequent forums with our other local governing bodies as well. So the one thing we wanted to do with this particular vehicle is we wanted to take that same energy and fervor that's on that Concerned Citizens of Harrisburg page and kind of convert it to actual face-to-face dialogue between residents, citizens, and their local elected officials. So that's what our hope is, and we look forward to the engaging dialogue, not only from our local elected officials, but also from you guys as well. Now, before I go into what the format's going to be, I first have to, I don't know where you are, John. First and foremost, I want to thank John Trainer for providing us with this magnificent facility. Let's give John Trainer and the folks at HMAC a round of applause. They even brought the velvet sofas out for us. They rolled the red carpet out for us, literally. Secondly, I want to thank my coordinators as well. This wasn't me. This was a collective, folks. This literally was a group of concerned citizens that said, hey, why don't we do this? Or I see the value in that. And those folks are Rajette Harris, who couldn't be here, unfortunately. She was supposed to be my co-moderator tonight. Unfortunately, she had a family emergency involving her mother, so please send your prayers and direct them to her. Lorraine Killian, who is going to be our timekeeper and also coordinator. She's also a long-time staffer with the Senate. Also, Terrence Webb in the rear of the room. Raise your hand so folks can see you. Also was very instrumental in putting this together. So how this is going to work, we're going to have one segment where it's going to be myself posing questions to our panelists, and then what we'll do, the second segment of this is we'll open it up to the public. This is what it's more so about you guys asking questions and getting answers to questions you otherwise may have had some difficulty doing, especially, it's kind of a tough act to do, especially in council. You can't get the undivided attention of your local elected officials, so this is what this is all about. So before I begin, I'm gonna have, in the spirit of time when you guys come up, just introduce yourselves. Most of you know who everyone is. There was some reorganization though with council, so some of the council members don't have the same committee. So when you come up, any questions that's posed to you, please say who you are, what committees you chair, and that's it. So our first question is going to be to the mayor. In March of last year, Mr. Dave Bottero, who served as the City of Harrisburg's community police coordinator, was dismissed from his position. Given the integral role of the community policing coordinator and the role that it plays in bridging the gap between the general public and the city's police department, can you please share where things are presently relative to that position and maybe a timetable of when that position will be filled?
I would be happy to. Thank you, Brandon, for hosting this event and for all of you for coming out. So the question had to do with community policing and specifically with the position of the community policing coordinator. It is true that we lost Dave Bottero last year, and we have since been conducting a search to determine a suitable replacement. I have recently sat in on one interview. I believe there are 2 more interviews scheduled here over the next couple weeks, and we look to have that position filled, I would say, by February, sometime in February as a time frame. We've had some really good applicants, highly qualified people, and I think the community will be pleased with the choice. I could expand on that answer and just say that, remember, the community policing coordinator is the sort of civilian liaison for the Harrisburg Police Department. We also have a community policing officer in Officer Joshua Hammer, whose face is probably known to many of you and who's out and about. And then we have a core of about 5 relatively recently trained community policing officers that are funded through a COPS grant that the city received. And the real issue facing community policing generally is making sure that we have adequate staffing for the Harrisburg Police Department to be able to free those officers up to do the type of proactive community interaction that we'd really like to see. But the goal is to have a full division of community policing officers working under Officer Hammer and in conjunction with the community liaison, whoever we should hire. Thank you.
And I just want to note to our panelists, you'll be afforded 3 minutes for your answers, so don't feel hurried. Lorraine will be giving you prompts that way to keep you on task. And staying in that same vein of community policing and the police department in general, Councilman Johnson, I know that you recently transitioned from the Public Safety Committee to the Housing and Building Committee. Nevertheless, I'm going to pose this question to you because during the previous legislative session, you dealt mostly with the public safety issue. So my question to you, Councilman Johnson, is many municipalities across the country have instituted citizen advisory committees or civilian oversight commissions for the purpose of ensuring that there are checks and balances between the police department and the community. Having said that, can you please share with us where things are relative to instituting either a citizens advisory committee or a civilian oversight commission?
Thank you. Once again, my name is Cornelius Johnson. I was the public safety chair. I transitioned to the building and housing chair. In regards to Mr. Flood's question, during last year, if you guys remember, during when we were discussing ride gear for the police department, one of the things that came out of it was actually forming a police task force where we would compose that with citizens and members of the administration and members of council to really map out what does that look like for the city of Harrisburg. Due to other legislative issues and timing of it, we weren't able to get that done towards the end of 2017. But just recently, last meeting, during our workshop session, we actually, as council, were working towards setting 2018 goals to see the things we would like to see accomplished within 2018. And that specifically was one of the goals that I mentioned that we should get on and try to work to get done. Basically, we realized when we first discussed it that for it to truly work, we would need about a police task force that will probably look at not only the police-citizen interactions, but also looking at training opportunities, also looking at communication, and just that constant dialogue back and forth between citizen and police. So we believe to really truly study that task force, we did not want to rush it. So we wanted it to be a process to get citizens together to possibly take about 6 to 8 months to analyze and come back to a report to council to base upon those recommendations and what to institute from there. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next question is going to be posed to Councilman Dave Mattson. It's in the same vein of crime. We'll try to keep the questions kind of fluid. So despite the total number of homicides in the city of Harrisburg having decreased as compared to the previous year, coupled with crime dropping to its lowest level in the last 15 years, do you know or can you share whether or not there'll be a greater emphasis on providing grants or other designated funds to local nonprofits to assist the city in reducing crime?
Hello, good evening. My name is Dave Mattson, and I'm the chair of Community Economic Development. And one of the big things we do as chair of Community Economic Development is overseeing CDBG monies. So these are federal grant monies we get from HUD that we allocate towards local nonprofits. So obviously a big part of the conversation, first we have to see how many people or all the applicants that apply for the Cdbg monies. Then we have to take a look at how we want to allocate it and what we'd like to focus on. So I think public safety is obviously going to be a big debate in our community, and that's something that while overseeing the Cdbg monies, we're going to take into consideration. Thanks.
Thank you. And since we're talking about investments in the city, my next question is going to be posed to Councilman Majors. We all have heard, in some people's opinion, maybe ad nauseum, about the comprehensive plan, Harrisburg's comprehensive plan. So whether you live in the city or anywhere in its surrounding communities, you've heard that term, comprehensive plan, being tossed around quite a bit. So as chairman of the Public Works Committee, could you please provide everyone with a brief overview of the purpose of the comprehensive plan, as well as an update on where things stand? And the mayor, you can feel free to piggyback off of Councilman Majors if you so choose to do so.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Wes Majors. I'm chair of the Public Works Committee for Harrisburg City Council. The comprehensive plan is a plan that is supposed to hopefully set a trajectory that the city is looking to go in for the future. We haven't had an update to our comprehensive plan in, I believe, it's been at least over 20 to 30 years since there's been an update. So back in 2014, council in that iteration took upon the process of working with the administration to find someone to hire to start that planning process. Meetings occurred over 2015 and 2016, and now we are looking to, in 2017, went to the Planning Commission, who then is reviewing the the comprehensive plan. They had a meeting last week to discuss the plan and get additional public comment on the plan. At this point, and I'm not going to speak for the Planning Commission, but based on the feedback that was received, there's a lot of work that we believe needs to be done. And I know the administration has some concerns with the comprehensive plan in its current iteration. So I believe they may look to have another meeting to discuss the plan with the residents. Once the Planning Commission decides on what they want to do, it then is sent to City Council for our review. We would go through a review process as well. What I've seen in the plan, there's a lot of very lofty goals. It seems like there's a lot of academic things in the plan. I don't know how much of the citizen engagement pieces were fully incorporated into the plan. There were meetings throughout the city, but the plan that we received seemed to not always coincide with what residents wanted. So we're hoping that this process, the document that we do have, can be edited and revised with further citizen engagement and engagement from council and the administration, so that we can have a plan, so then we can start looking to improve the city of Harrisburg for all of its residents and visitors. Thank you.
Thank you. And in keeping with the subject of the fiscal health of the city, my next question is going to be posed to Councilman Allott. Despite the city achieving more than an $8.5 million unrestricted fund balance this fiscal year, the city currently remains under state receivership pursuant to Act 47. As chairman of the Budget and Finance Committee, could you please briefly summarize the city's current financial outlook and explain where the city presently finds itself with regard to Act 47? I know that's a lot, but you're the man for the job. You're the man for the job.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ben Allott, Chair of Budget and Finance and Vice President for Council. So breaking it down a little bit, going back into 2013 is when the city entered into Act 47 receivership with the state. What that was the culmination of a state mandated plan for us to be able to restore some fiscal health to the community. Fast forward to 4 years, we've been able to have a balanced budget, focus on specific revenues coming in, and monitor our expenses going out. So a lot of people wonder, well, how can we exit Act 47? Are we prepared to do so? Well, a lot of that is due to the tools that Act 47 laid out for us to be a part of. one of which was an elevated LST tax, which increased the LST that was paid into the city, and that was covered by not just the residents of the city of Harrisburg, but also those who work in the city of Harrisburg. The fear is that while we have a fund balance right now, in absence of some of the protections that we've been afforded as part of Act 47, we are not certain that we could adequately budget for the things that the city needs to do. When you think about things like infrastructure, and we all know it walking around and driving around the city, that the city has needs that exist. So the fear in going forward is that we may not be ready to just jump out of Act 47 in absence of the provisions that we were given as being part of that process. So one of the things that we have to look at this year as both a council and the administration is what is our path forward working within the confines of Act 47 and what happens beyond that. That is why many of you have probably heard that we hired a lobbyist to work with the state. We are looking to pursue any and all options to maintain what I would say is the fiscal health for the community going forward. We are coming out of 40 years, more than 40 years, of neglect to a lot of the infrastructure needs that the city has. We are just now starting to catch up. If anyone followed this budget process the last season, this was the first year we had a fully developed comp plan to be able to, capital improvement plan. Look, we just talked about comp plan. Capital improvement plan, it was the first time we've had that in quite some time. So that's just the beginning. It cannot be the end. And for us to be able to maintain long-term sustainability, we need to focus in on those capital improvement projects, which guess what, will really drain any general fund balance that we have if we don't address how we go forward in the future. So sorry for a very wordy, heady answer to that question, but hopefully I scratched the surface a little bit.
You did indeed. And if anyone has any follow-up questions, you can very well pose them to Councilman Alot. Thank you. All right, I'm going to pivot back to Councilman Madsen, since we are still talking about the fiscal health of the city. We're also talking, one of the other buzzwords or terms du jour is economic development, workforce development. So as chairman of the Community and Economic Development Committee, what would you say represents the city's biggest economic development opportunity, in your opinion?
Yeah. So when you look at the economic data with Harrisburg, our median income is $32,000 or $34,000 a year with a 7% unemployment rate. I'd always say your safest investment is in your residents. What I want to do is partner with CareerLink, the STEP program in HAC. Those of you who are not familiar with CareerLink or STEP, CareerLink is a state program that trains people who are getting adapted to the workforce to get them reallocated back into work. And then the STEP program is a program offered at HAC. It's free. It's essentially boot camp for jobs training, where they learn how to use their, develop a resume, interviewing skills, and other things like that that'll help them get a job. So they even have like a career fair after they graduate where they can meet potential employers. So I think that a lot of residents, when I'm out in the community talking to them, they don't know about these programs. And what I want to do is, through town hall meetings like this, educate our populace of what's out there so that they can get into the workforce. So I would say that's my top priority, is just communication and information for our residents. And I would say, again, the best investment is just investing in our community and our residents.
Thank you. Now, pivoting back to the mayor, diversity and inclusion is part and parcel to any local government, especially when we're talking about economic development, especially when we're talking about the city of Harrisburg. City of Harrisburg, more than half of its population are minorities, racial minorities. So my question to you would be, as I mentioned, diversity and inclusion should be the hallmark of any government. That said, can you please share what efforts the Office of Social Equity and Affirmative Action have undertaken to ensure that the city is living up to its billing of diverse and inclusive?
Well, thank you for that question. And it's an important one because the new Office of Social Equity and Affirmative Action is part of a reorganization that I put in place for my second term. We did not have a social equity director, and it was sort of a reorganization of our risk management office, which also coincided with the hiring of a business administrator, which has allowed us to put together a really powerful team which is able to really focus on issues of inclusion and diversity. I can say a couple different things. First, one of the things, and some of you may know our Social Equity and Affirmative Action Office Director. Her name is Shashawn Dial. And she has done a wonderful job already in instituting and getting up and running our new Harrisburg Human Relations Commission, which is out there to be able to hear issues of, that may arise in the workplace for people that are being discriminated against. It works in conjunction with the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, and they've already begun meeting. Council recently confirmed a 9-member board of really terrific people to do that. In addition to the Human Relations Commission, Shashawn has also been revising all of our internal policies and procedures, and is working as part of a joint task force specifically on how to empower minority businesses and increase participation as Harrisburg begins to continue its sort of economic development and a lot of the projects and renaissance that we're seeing. Now, I know this issue is near and dear to City Council's hearts, and I think it's going to be a real collective focus of the next several years as we move forward, as we're creating new jobs and issuing new permits and seeing the city develop. We want to make sure our own residents and local businesses are all a part of that. Now, the city for many years has had an ordinance which requires, it basically sets a goal of participation in public projects. And it also establishes the maintenance of a list where you can become registered and certified as a minority business within the city. And the way that's supposed to work is when a developer or anyone comes and does a project in the city, you have a ready-made list broken down by trade. I recently reviewed the list, so you can find your plumbers or electricians or people who hang drywall or whatever, all itemized on the list. The city can do, I think, a better job, however, in making sure and actively recruiting to the list and making sure that list reaches the right hands. I know that we just last week, rather shockingly, we were hearing a land development proposal from Harristown. I'll finish here, and for a project that they were doing in the downtown, and they acquired publicly whether or not that list still existed. And here's one of our major developers that wasn't really aware of the existence of that list. So we're working on that. We've got other initiatives, but maybe I can address more with future questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Johnson, as was mentioned, you are the new chair of the Housing and Building Committee. This council has one of the, at least in terms of age, one of the youngest councils, I would say, not only in the region, but probably the state for that matter. Having known you personally and knowing that you're a man of many ideas, my question to you would be, given the prevalence of blight in the city and that it continues to be an often cited issue, in your new role, do you have any novel or unconventional ideas for how to address Harrisburg's blight program? And if so, can you share it with us?
So under my old role, so when the reorganization happened 4 years ago of the city departments, codes actually fell under public safety. But building it, so it used to be under the building and housing spectrum, but it was under public safety. So I was kind of under that umbrella already with public safety, but still transitioning to building and housing. But as everyone knows, blight is a major issue. One of the major issues with blight is absentee landlords. I know the city has took aggressive steps as far as taking part of the vacant property registry, where properties that have been foreclosed on, where we are able to kind of establish a database, and from that database we're able to contact the banks who hold the deeds to these properties in order to kind of cite them for the properties being unkept. Also, this past budget cycle, we invested an additional $250,000 to demo more blighted properties. Typically the city was demoing about anywhere from 18 to 22 properties with a budget of about 110,000. With this additional 250,000, we're looking to do a total of 50 properties for the year. With that 250,000, we're looking to outsource those actual housing to be built to kind of supplement our in-house demo crew. So usually right now you'll see our in-house demo crew going around. So that 250 would go to outsource where we can get outside contractor to help supplement those efforts. This was more or less a pilot year to see how that works with the bid process and getting contractors and seeing how that works. And hopefully in the future, with our, if we are fiscally responsible, we can even add to that amount of saying maybe 250, 300,000, 400,000 to be more aggressive. What we realized through our last budget cycle, our codes administrator came downstairs and gave us a priority list with 415 properties on there that are just needed for demo. These are not even condemned properties. We're talking about 415 properties right now that could be demolished. So we have to come together and really work on I would say a 5 to 7 year plan to really aggressively attack it, because people have been dealing with it for 20 plus years. Some of the properties that are in distress, I've been looking at it since I was 15 years old when I was a kid. So rather than kind of playing around with it, I think we have to be more aggressive. So that's one of the approaches, and we can talk about more as far as home ownership and actually getting residents to kind of go into buying condemned homes and turn them into livable homes where they can kind of reap the benefits of being a home ownership while real estate's at a low price. Thank you.
Thank you. See, this is why this question was posed to him. He was assessing properties at 15 years of age, so that's why we posed it to him. All right, this next question is going to be posed to council. It's going to be more generic in scope. We're going to start with Councilman Allott and work our way down. The same question will be posed to you separately, Mr. Mayor. Given the fact that Council President Williams was unable to make it due to a previous commitment, my question has to deal with the Council President's role. The Council President is charged with placing legislative items on the agenda. As such, and this is from your own, your own respective committees, are there any particular legislative items, whether in your committee or just generally, that you would like to see added to that legislative agenda this legislative session, starting with Councilman Allott?
So for me, for the last probably close to 2 years, in conjunction with the Controller's Office, the Treasurer's Office, and members of the administration, we've been working on a debt policy for the city, as well as a general fund balance policy. These are two, from my point of view, really important pieces of legislation if you followed the history of our community. The debt policy would create parameters of which the city could enter into borrowing agreements for projects that perhaps might need borrowing. If you followed some deals that were made prior to when any of us actually sat on council, when I've looked at it now, I think, how on earth did that ever happen, and how could that have ever gotten approved previously? So my goal with that is to be able to put in some protections in place for both our council as it is now, but future councils, to be able to have a very responsible way of approaching borrowing. The second part, the general fund balance policy, when we have a situation when there is money sitting within the general fund, to also create a mechanism for how you would be able to draw upon that money. To have checks and balances so there's not autonomous control where somebody can make an arbitrary decision to spend money without the appropriation or without the approval of both the council and the administration. So those two pieces of legislation, we've actually worked on it behind the scenes. It's ready to come back and get introduced in a legislative session, which means it would get sent to a committee, which means we can have public comment to be able to do it. I often realize I don't work with the quote-unquote sexiest committee on council, but these are really important issues to be able to come out and discuss and provide input on. So if you're following that, please come out and lend your public support and comment and what you'd like to see as part of that going forward. So,
thank you. Councilman Johnson.
So like I said earlier, at our last workshop session, we actually talked as a council as far as trying to set 2018 goals, which I think was pretty significant because in my time of council, I don't think we ever council has ever kind of sat down together and kind of publicly talked about things they want to accomplish, which I think is important. So two near and dear things that are important to me, touching back on a previous conversation, is minority participation. It's my position that the city is not doing enough, and we have to do more. If you look back at a lot of our contracts, there's certain areas where that there are good participation rates, but there's certain projects, especially if you want to know about the 3rd Street project, the participation rate was really low, only about 2%, and that's a major, major project. So as we're looking at projects coming down the line, whether as the city keeps investing in their infrastructure, or as Harrisburg University, looking to build a $150 million project there, or we have Harristown doing multiple developments there. Even though that's outside of the city realm, we have to talk about minority participation from a greater Harrisburg region. Because as we know, contractors don't just do work in the city of Harrisburg, they do work inside the region. So for one, we need to increase our participation with our small contractors working with these GCs, so they're in the position to become GCs. And we also have to hold our GCs accountable to, if we as a government are going to set these participation rates, that we are doing everything such as pre-bid meetings, linking GCs with these subcontractors who are able to do the work, following up on solicitation, and then from there, if GCs are still not willing to comply, even doing clawback. So I know Capital Region Water has been aggressive as far as their diversity plan. I think the city needs to move in that same direction. A second portion of that, one thing we have to pay attention to as the city develops is looking at more inclusion zoning. Downtown is becoming a beautiful place, and people want to live, work, and play there. But one thing we realize, if we know what our medium wage is, and we have a family of 4, they probably couldn't afford to pay $1,000, $1,200, $1,400 living downtown. So we have to make sure that there is affordable housing provided in all places of the city, whether it's downtown or we have major plots that's undeveloped in Midtown. So if we're not starting to think about that conversation now and making sure that within all regions of the city that people are able to live, and people in different cities and different counties have done it from a policy standpoint as far as setbacks and different inclusions to kind of make sure that within each zone that affordable housing is provided. I think from a council perspective that we should begin to look at that as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
As Mr. Johnson mentioned, we talked about our goals last week. For Public Works Committee, my main goal is to update our sanitation ordinance. Back prior to my time on council, trash cans were provided to city residents, but in terms of making sure that the billing is being properly applied to each parcel in the city, I think there are some issues that need to be worked out. I've been hearing a lot from residents who own a vacant property but are being charged for, not even a vacant property, but a vacant lot, but they are still receiving a trash charge. So as we're looking to update the sanitation ordinance, we had a discussion briefly about it in May of 2017. Last year, we were just unable to get it across the finish line before the end of the legislative session. So that's my number one priority, is to address our sanitation ordinance. We're also looking to possibly move with Public Works picking up some new loaders as we're trying to improve trash collection throughout the city. We may have to change where the point of pickup for some residents. So as we're going to go through this process, we're going to make it very public, as Mr. Johnson did with some of his ordinances. We're looking to have meetings not just down at City Hall. We're going to take those meetings to the community, because not every resident can get down to City Hall for a 6 o'clock meeting, but we can also always be able to travel to where you are. So look forward to that being coming down from the administration and City Council, and us having a series of public meetings to get your input on updating our sanitation ordinance in the city of Harrisburg. Another thing that is not necessarily legislative, but we need to work on improving our partnership with, is street sweeping. As many residents know, Capital Region Water is in charge of street sweeping, and they have contracted a private company, DBI, to do street sweeping of city streets. As Public Works Chair, I've been hearing a lot of questions and been in contact with CRW as we're moving forward. Residents are always saying, well, Is the street sweeping day still the same? Why aren't leaves being picked up as they were before? So we're just going to continue to improve that line of communication and really reach out to CRW to make sure that our residents know who's in charge of what and what days things need to be out, so that they don't feel like they're being burdened by our signs that aren't very clear as to when street sweeping is being done.
Thank you.
Yeah, from a legislative standpoint for community economic development, the big thing I'd like to look at is our regulations. A lot of small businesses tell me in the community that the regulations that we have are cumbersome, and I want to take a real hard look at those and see, some you can't have no regulations, right? You have to have some, but let's try to make them as efficient and make sure that it's about keeping people safe and making sure that it's not overloading the businesses. And then the other piece I want to look at is the cost of starting a business in Harrisburg is still, comparative to a lot of other municipalities, quite expensive. And so that's a big complaint I hear from the small business community, again, is that the cost of starting a business is a little bit higher than it would be other places. So I want to work with Ben and the administration on seeing what we can do about lowering the cost for starting our small businesses. So that's going to be my priorities. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, the same questions are going to be posed to you. Can you share what initiatives or initiative of significance that your administration will be working on this legislative session?
Sure. Yeah, I think your original question had also a little bit to do with the council president and the setting of the agenda. And first of all, I think you can tell from the responses, we've got a very good city council, very engaged, and I think we're primed to really accomplish a lot working together. And certainly my overarching goal is to work collaboratively. I think over the past 4 years, there haven't been any examples of any legislative initiatives that haven't had a fair hearing and haven't been able to get on the agenda. The one area that we have had some bottleneck and some issues has to do with the issue of appointments to boards and commissions. And that has been an area of some tension because the council president controls the agenda, and occasionally I will send names down, and if they die, they don't even make it to a hearing. One of the ways I think we can work around that is by a potential rule change, which I know City Council has discussed and may be occurring, where we basically take our boards and commissions and perhaps put them in the domains of the various committees. It would also allow us to highlight those openings and potentially allow us to do a better job of recruiting. So as we look forward, a very, very important decision, which the city is going to have to make in the next month or so, is who to appoint to the Capital Region Water Board. We currently have 4 expired terms. Some of those may need to be renewed, some may need to be replaced. That is an issue that will come back before council. We're going to be sending down a name for our zoning hearing board at the next council session, and I think we're working collaboratively on that. But I'd like to see us sort of streamline that process in such a way that encourages people to want to get involved civically, want to volunteer, want to be a part of it, and also allows a sort of more a smoother vetting process that works better for making sure that all those boards are filled. Thanks.
Thank you. Now at this point, what we're going to do is transition into the public comment segment. Now, for those of you that may have come in late, we're asking people to, if you have a question, just to write your question down. You'll have the option of either coming to the mic in person and posing the question, or they'll provide me with the question and I can ask on your behalf. And as a good segue to the mayor's comments, and certainly it's your prerogative, guys, who wants to answer the question. But the first question that we received is, why does City Council not work more cooperatively with the mayor? Anyone want to take that?
I think that's more of a perception question. I think if you actually it's not about a balance of working well with the mayor or not working well with the mayor. I think it's about people wanting to see good government. I think people saw examples of how things were petty. People argue about things that weren't really true to the issue. But if you paid attention, I would say for the past, at least I'm gonna speak for myself, speak for the past 2 years, and I think a lot of people are on here, you know, that's where we saw a lot of shaping of the council then, that it's really been productive. We have our debates, we cooperate, there's things that we have shared initiatives, there's things that may be, you know, maybe a proposal from the administration that council may not agree with, or maybe a proposal from council the same way, but I think overall it's a perception of people believing that it's not a cooperative working relationship, which I think is there. That doesn't mean we have to agree on everything. I think that's what makes good government, so.
Thank you. Sure.
I actually can't believe I have to admit this. I'm the longest serving member of City Council here tonight, too. Historically, I think, prior even to when I came on, you saw a lot more combative relationships between council and administration, and we actually have not had that to the same degree. I think if you look at council votes, for instance, in the last term, particularly the last legislative session for the last 2 years, if you look at the votes, largely we are either unanimous in a vote or pretty close to unanimous when we pass something together. What that should show you is that there has been a collaboration where council is comfortable with what has been presented by administration and or vice versa to be able to, you know, put something forward. To Cornelius's point, that doesn't mean that there's not a point of debate or discussion about the issues. We on council take our role as kind of a checks and balances as part of our responsibility in government very seriously. And that's not to say that the mayor is doing a bad job or anything along those lines, but that is the part that we play in this puzzle called government, and I think that's something that we take very seriously and very important. Are there opportunities for us to always work better? Yes. One of the greatest things we've just talked about collectively in our work session last week is communication back and forth between the administration and council. We have commitments on both sides to improve that, and I think going forward you will see that really play out in a much more positive way, even more so than I think what has occurred over the last few years on council anyway.
Thank you. Sure. And my next question will be to you anyway. So.
I'll be very brief on this one and say that I think we work very well together, and I think perhaps one of the things that I'm most proud of is the degree to which we have moved from, just as a city, from a much more fractious and combative relationship between the mayor and city council to one now that I think is thoughtful and is really paying off in results for the public. I'm proud to work with any of these individuals. I think they, I've said many times that we are all elected by the same constituents and we should all be working towards the same goals. There's a proper role for checks and balances, but it's also never improper to be working together collaboratively for the good of the public. So, and one change that I will say that I think has made a difference is that I do make an effort to go to pretty much every city council meeting and workshop session, and have done that consistently for the last 4 years and will continue to do that. And I think that's improved communication. It's not to say that we can't continue to improve communication, but it lets us really work together in a very clear way for all the public to see.
All right.
Next question.
And I have a two-part question. The person that submitted this, they have a series of questions, but I'm gonna just go with the two since they're both germane to one another about 2nd Street. So the first question is, what are your future plans for 2nd Street? The current route is the disaster. And the second question is, what is the update with 2nd Street closings at 1:30 a.m. relative to the business?
Okay, you're talking about not 2nd Street Transportation, but 2nd Street Car District?
Correct.
Or both? Or?
Yes, both.
Okay, both. All right. Well, from a planning standpoint, let me address that first. It is my hope that we will see 2nd Street return to two-way traffic, basically north of Foster Street and all the way up there. It would not apply to the downtown, but it would apply to what is largely a residential neighborhood of the city cut through by a superhighway of commuters. I think it has to be done carefully and slowly and in conjunction with changes that will occur to other streets, whether they be 3rd Street, which is now being paved, or 6th Street, or 7th Street, or Division Street. As many of you also know, we have a longer-term vision and currently a federal Tiger Grant application for a bridge that would help unite the city and the Hack campus in Wildwood over the train tracks at Division Street, which might prove another access point for commuters to come in and out of the city. So that's very much in progress, and it's a series of steps. Over the past weeks, the federal courthouse has been heating up. There's been a lot of talk about changing the sort of area of 7th Street, especially between Foster and Riley Street, and I could go on and on. But these changes are happening, and it's one of my goals to see 2nd Street go to 2 ways by the end of this term. And then regarding the downtown and the bars, one thing that I think was a misperception was that somehow we were, that basically the city was showing special attention to particular bars in one area of the city. Quite to the contrary, the city has made it very clear that, especially with the manpower and police presence that we have to maintain officers in every district of this city. It doesn't allow for it doesn't allow really for any extra coverage, and sometimes it only allows for a limited amount of proactive policing, given our numbers. That said, we have allowed individual businesses to pay for police officers to perform extra duty work. So the bars themselves are paying for them, much like the Harrisburg Senators pay for extra officers, or the Farm Show might for special events, or UPMC Pinnacle might. And that program has worked, and it's available not just for businesses in the downtown, it's available for businesses throughout the city. So it's one way of getting additional presence, but not putting the burden on the taxpayers, rather putting it on the businesses. And that seems to have worked well. There has been a greater emphasis on crime control. We've also brought all of the major business owners together, and it was rather remarkable. You had a situation where the owners of Arugas, Sawyer's, and Gastropub had actually had never met each other, couldn't even recognize each other before we brought them together and sat them down at a table. So we can talk more, but thank you.
Thank you. All right, this next question more than likely will be posed to Councilman Allott, but anyone can feel free to offer their answer. So, and forgive me whoever posed this question, I'm reading them verbatim, so if I'm misrepresenting the question or I'm taking it out of context, feel free to come up and clarify. So the question is, what is the status now that some residents have prepaid their property taxes? Do we know what percentage have prepaid their taxes?
Okay, so I should preface and say I'm not a tax accountant, but if I'm going to assume, is this probably in light of the new tax law? That's what I'm making.
That is not in the question. Feel free to clarify, whoever posed the question.
Is that all right? Well, make the. Yeah, I actually do not know, and that would be something, I mean, actually more than happy to look into. That would probably be a request we can make of the Treasurer's Office to see just that. Just some context, I think there was, and there probably still is, a lot of confusion about what happened with the new tax law that Congress passed and kind of our impact locally, and I think many of us are still waiting to see guidance come out on that so we can be clear, and I say this personally, so I can be clear personally, as well as everybody here in terms of how to be able to respond to that. So unfortunately, I don't know that I have a great, answer to give, other than for all of us, as much as all of you, we're waiting for increased guidance to come out on that. But we can make a request to the Treasurer's Office to see just how many people did.
Thank you. And I would also encourage everyone to, if you don't get your question answered definitively this evening, please sign up. There's a sign-up sheet. If you're not able to get in contact with your local elected officials, certainly we will be more than happy to provide follow-up and get your questions answered. The next question more than likely will be Councilman Johnson. It has to do with building and housing. The question is, what is the status of South 14th Street residents Have they moved? Are some still there? And obviously this pertains to the sinkhole that had formed in that area.
I can tell you a little bit about it. I think the mayor will have the most up-to-date information on it. I know the city has started closing on properties, so there's some residents who are completely closed out, and the city owns those properties now. There are still some residents who are, it takes a lot to move, so we're actually buying the property from the residents, and the residents have to move. So there's some residents who are getting some things together in order to move from that property. But overall, the city is looking to purchase 53 homes, Mayor? About how many homes? Yeah, 53 homes from the South 14 project. And we have the grant funding to do so. So now it's just about going through the closing process with those residents to either relocate them, as well as I think there were some residents on the street that were actually renting. So they do have I think there's some moving costs for certain situations for those as well. But for the actual amount of properties who are closed to date, I would refer that more to the mayor's office because they have the most up-to-date information on that.
Thank you. You good?
Yeah, we've had rolling closes. I don't know exactly where we stand. Somewhere around 20, I think, have already had the deeds transferred to the city, and the city currently owns the properties. We've secured the properties, we've winterized the properties, we have them ready to go. We have taken the position that we're going to work with the homeowners and not rush them out. In many instances, the people that sold initially were the ones that were already relocated, already ready to go, and all those closings were simple. Other people still are, especially some of the properties that have renters in them, still are working with the relocation specialists to find proper accommodations, and we've gotten a series of extensions allowing us to have longer time to do it. But by the end of the year, certainly, and at some point in 2018, we will have ownership to all the properties. And actually, it's 54. It was going to be 53, but then it's the one person who had originally wanted to opt out is now wanting to opt in. So I think we will own all the properties. They'll then be demolished. It'll be turned into green space. I've seen some basic concepts, but it'll be a simple green space that the city will maintain.
Thank you. I'm going to turn over one question to coordinator as well as attendee. He'll ask his own question of the panel. Mr. Webb.
Thank you. Actually, it's kind of a threefold question, but I'll fold it into one.
Thank you.
Okay, this is directed to the mayor. There was an issue with the I'm sorry. There was an issue of $375,000 being given by the Gaming Commission to the city of Harrisburg, which was somehow circumvented and given to the Civil War Museum. And there was an issue of that, and it's been an issue. It's never been resolved to my knowledge, and I want to know what the status was at this time.
Terrence, I am not sure exactly what you're referring to with regard to the 375 from the Gaming Commission. I can give you an update generally on the city's position with the Civil War Museum, if that would be helpful. As you know, when I took office, it seemed that the Civil War Museum was really sort of the embodiment of a lot of improper and unauthorized spending on the backs of the taxpayers. And we had a situation where you had millions of dollars in city assets, items that we had paid for, tied up by a largely unaccountable organization, and no rent was being paid to the city. So we had a series of meetings, and we tried to structure a solution and a way out of this that would work for residents. And it coincided with the Reservoir Park Master Plan. We spent a lot of time and energy working with the community to develop a complete overhaul for the park, everything from new playgrounds, new athletic facilities, new pavilions, new walking trails, new traffic routes, over $8-9 million of improvements. And all of which would, of course, benefit the museum. The museum is there, the building is there, the parking lot has been built. We can't deny its existence. So the proposal was twofold: to sell the museum the artifacts that the city had purchased at a discount, but at least to get hopefully millions of dollars back for them, which could then go into the park. And at the same time, also establish a rent schedule for the museum so that as it continued, the rent would slowly grow over time, and the city would have a fund that it could then use to pay for the maintenance on what is largely an older building. That seemed like a sensible ultimate solution for how to deal with those issues. There was also a taxing issue related to hotel tax dollars that we worked out with the Visitors Bureau that has resulted in the hiring of not one but 2 city employees that have given us the capacity to better run our festivals and do things that were very hard to do when I first took office 4 years ago. So we've tried to work for constructive solutions. It doesn't change my opinion on the whether or not we should have done this in the first place, but it is looking to the future with an eye for having some of those resources put back into the community, and specifically back into Reservoir Park.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I appreciate your answer, but I'm not sure that answers my question.
Right.
My question was directly, am I incorrect in understanding that the Gaming Commission is collecting a tax from the casinos,
Okay.
which we get part of that money? Am I incorrect in
I
that?
think you are conflating 2 different issues.
Okay.
I think you are thinking about the hotel tax, which was also collected by the county and is
Right.
a tax that is paid when people stay at hotels. And a portion of that is supposed to go back into marketing the city. And a large proportion of that, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, was going to underwrite the museum.
Okay.
There is also a gaming control board, and there is money that comes to Dauphin County for as basically being the host of a casino in Dauphin County, and that money is given out in grants.
Okay.
Some of that money may also have gone to the museum, so you could be correct on that. But that money there's no requirement that the casino money go to the city of Harrisburg, whereas there is a requirement that a portion of the hotel tax money go to the city of Harrisburg, and that's where the rub went over those issues.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
All right. Okay, thank you.
All right, and keep it in line with the city. This question isn't so much a policy question, but one more so giving us an assessment of the social climate of Harrisburg. And you talked about tourism and marketing the city and being open and inviting to those that decide to take residence in the city. So the question is, there's a surprising amount of animosity expressed regarding newcomers to the city. What is our government, both the administration as well as council, doing to reduce the animosity that is directed towards newcomers? Essentially, I'm assuming transplants to the city. Anyone want to take that? Or does the person who wrote the question want to expound upon? Or
We understand the question. It was so that has a lot to do with, I believe personally, a lot of tension that a lot of residents that have been in Harrisburg for a while feel that maybe newcomers are getting a better deal with some of the tax abatements and different programs that are available, or even some newcomers come in and they may not be knowledgeable of different activities or community organizations that exist, and they're looking to, and to some seasoned residents of Harrisburg, reinvent the wheel. We want Harrisburg to be an open place for everyone to feel comfortable in and welcome. I would encourage newcomers to engage their communities, reach out to neighbors, and just start having that dialogue. As someone who's been in Harrisburg for the majority of my life, I personally welcome new blood and new life into the city of Harrisburg. It's good. We can't continue to be stagnant and have the same ideas over and over again. So just want to encourage people to be inclusive of everyone, say hello, be engaging with their community, reach out, social media, in person, at different organizations and events, and really just take in all that Harrisburg has to offer for everyone.
Thank you. Sure.
So I'll just add from the perspective of a transplant to Harrisburg. I moved in the city, oh gosh, almost 20 years ago. I can't believe I can actually admit that. So I've actually lived in Harrisburg longer than I lived anywhere else. But I think there's two sides to that coin. I think that one of the great benefits of a community like Harrisburg is the fact that it is a diverse and I want it to be, and I think we all dream it to be, an inclusive community. And I think that's what is something we need to strive to do. I think if you are a transplant or someone who's lived here your entire life, I think the key is to be engaging in conversation that is benefiting the community and not attacking the community. I think we live in an interesting climate right now where it's hard to have a conversation with someone who disagrees with you. And that shouldn't be reflective of our community as a whole. So I think that it really is incumbent upon all of us to be able to engage in conversation, to have dreams for our community, and to be able to think of ways that we can come together as one larger community and not a kind of a community dissections. And I think that's a fear that some people might have. But again, I think the other side too, as someone who is a transplant, is you also can't walk into a community and have all the answers, right? That is part of that. And I think you have to be able to engage and have constructive dialogue about what's important to both you as the individual and the neighborhood and a community. And that should always be done in a respectful, not combative way. I think I'd like to use council as an example of that. I think on council, many of us have represented different sections of the city that we've come from, where we've grown up. And I love the dialogue that we have among us here. So I would hope that that can be reflective of the community on a larger basis.
Thank you. You good? Sure.
I'd like to touch on that one a little bit too, just because I think this is going to be, I think the tension between newcomers and old Harrisburg, however you want to phrase it, is one of those divisions that we as a community need to really work through. There is just no question that if the city is going to be economically sustainable moving forward, we need to grow our population. We are half the population that we were in the 1950s, and we've begun to see that trend change over the past 2 years. More people are moving into the city, more people are paying taxes, and we're seeing the revenues increase, whether it's the earned income tax, the amount of money that they're earning, or the local services tax, the number of jobs that are happening. We're seeing a lot of conversions of office space into a living space. This brings with it new residents. So when it's important that Harrisburg be welcoming, but also recognize that there is a benefit to these new residents, to the old residents, which is that we establish a sustainable tax base that will hopefully lessen the burden on people who have lived here all their lives and who remember what it was like to be at the brink of bankruptcy. Now, not to get controversial, but this is where it also, I think it really comes down to the issue of gentrification and whether or not we're seeing that in Harrisburg and what that means, because I think part of the fear is that the newcomers are displacing or moving out the older Harrisburg residents. And that's probably where we need to have a conversation. There are, first of all, I don't think that's largely happening in Harrisburg yet. It is something that could happen, because I think a lot of what is being renovated, whether it's this building here or the millworks down the street or you name it, these were all vacant, abandoned buildings not very long ago. So, or vacant office buildings that are being converted. But as the city continues to grow, you will see a continued effort to revitalize and redevelop structures which are currently serving a purpose. And that's where it's incumbent on all of us from a policy standpoint to make sure that we're doing things such as preserving access to affordable housing in all neighborhoods. And that can be done through zoning, it can be done through policy decisions. So I understand the fear and I understand the root of the divisions, but I think we should acknowledge the benefit that population growth has for the city, and we should work together to ensure that basically that prosperity benefits everyone.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Samira Randolph. I'm sure a lot of you all are familiar with me because I've reached out to a few of you, besides a couple, on this panel. But my main question is, as a citizen and a constituent in this community, I wanted to know why there's no response when citizens file complaints or request an investigation into police officers' behavior, district attorney's behavior. Especially, I'm actually mostly talking to you, Mr. Pathfuse, because as you know, I'm the victim of a police chase in 2014. I was hospitalized. I had had my hip replaced. All my ribs was broken. My leg was broken. My pelvis was broken in 3 places because Harrisburg City police officers, Stilton police officers, the Attorney General's office, and Swatara Police were conducting a high-speed chase trying to apprehend somebody. They struck me and my 5-year-old son. Ever since then, I've been trying to get an investigation launched into that accident. You sent your former aide, Mr. Patero, to the hospital after I had just came out of surgery to find out what happened, and you sent him under the pretense of making me feel like he was there for our family, but he only wanted information so that the police officers could manipulate the reports so that they weren't held liable. And because I've been so vocal—
Can I just interject real quick? It seems like this is a very personal question. Granted, there's certainly some merit that I guess the public can benefit from it, but I would encourage you, other than whatever your general question is, to pose that to the mayor or any of his officials that are on hand one-on-one.
Yes, well, ultimately, the basis of my question is why doesn't anyone respond? I met with Representative Patty Kim 2 weeks ago, and she told me that my excessive letters, emails, and phone calls annoy people and turn people off. That's why nobody listens to me. But how else do you get justice? How else do you get somebody to respond to your issues without using a pen and paper? And I'm sorry if that makes me annoying, but I want justice. And I believe that every last one of you deserve to give me an opportunity to sit down with me and listen to what I have to say. Because I'm telling you, if you listen to what I have to say, people are gonna get fired.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Like I said, that's probably a question to have a sidebar with the mayor on or any of his officials, just because of the personal nature of it, unless the mayor wants to address it.
I would like at least a small address.
Spirit of time, that's all I'm saying.
It's in a small way. Doesn't have to be extensive.
Well, I'll say a couple things. I'll say, first of all, I am very sorry about what happened to you and your injuries and your family and the whole circumstances surrounding that chase and that scene were tragic. I will also say that I am willing to meet with you, and I will make sure that happens, and we can set up a time right after this forum, so I will listen to you and hear what you have to say. I think sometimes it's hard to respond to the specifics of specific incidents, especially when there's a potential litigation and a legal component to what's happening. So people have to be careful what they say publicly, especially if litigation is underway. So that could explain some of the difficulty in the communication. But just for me personally, I will sit down with you and talk to you and listen to what you have to say. Thank you.
Yes, sir, I appreciate that because ignoring somebody is never the answer.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hello. I have a follow-up just to the second sweet question that was asked. So, I thank you for the wealth of knowledge that you've given us on what's going on 2nd Street. But my question was more related. I'm a rideshare driver, and I want to know what is being done with the section of Second Street that gets closed at 1:30. It's a complete disaster. Have we stopped doing that now? And Second Street is now open. And, my knowledge on it is you probably don't know what is happening on Second Street at 1:30 in the morning. But as a rideshare driver, trying to get people out safely, it's a complete disaster. We have met with the chief of police, but nothing has changed. And when we sit down there and we are trying to pick up people and we see 6 cops standing on the corner when, as a rideshare driver, we were told when it first started that we would be allowed in and through to do pickups, that doesn't happen. And we're taking 3 lanes of traffic onto a one-way street. It's a complete disaster. So just wanted to find out what the follow-up, are we done with Second Street closings? And just possibly the future of what you and the chief of police maybe have for rideshare drivers getting people out of the Second Street area safely.
I think it was never going to be sustainable to close Second Street every night forever. That was an extraordinary, we had some extraordinary circumstances which necessitated us coming together and focusing on what we could do for crowd control. The intent of closing the street was never to negatively impact people like yourself who were offering rides home. In fact, the goal was to get people home safely and to allow rideshare or taxis or anyone to make it through the closure. So to the extent that that didn't work during that period of time, I would be happy to talk to you more about your reflections on how to make it work better. But no, the city's long-term plans would be to no longer continue closing Second Street. So we would like to continue to have the bars continue to pay for the extra duty officers, but ultimately that is up to them. And some of the bars will continue to do that and others probably won't. So.
Yeah. Having the extra police presence is fine. When they put their cars in the middle of the street
Right.
and just walk away from it and not allow what we were supposed to get through, that's the other issue. So, we went to the chief of police just to say, hey, could we get through to do our pickups? Right. But, if that's completely stopped, and I have to admit, I haven't been on Second Street for the past 2 weekends.
Yeah, that's not continuing. But I will say that even when we did it, maybe I would just encourage you to recognize that the police were dealing with issues of crowd control. People were getting hurt, and so they took that as part of a comprehensive series of steps to try and calm things down. I think it did work. I think things are in a good place now, and hopefully we can keep it and in such a way that doesn't impact your livelihood.
Sounds good. There's a ton of us, and we have a very active community to get people moved around.
That's right. And Harrisburg was at the forefront of making it possible and supporting rideshare services in the city. So.
Exactly. So thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
Evening, gentlemen.
Evening.
I'm Dan Snowden, and I just had a question. This is about institutions of higher learning and mainly trying to bring Harrisburg to become an education incubator. In this case, has it ever been explored for Harrisburg's potential of becoming, 1, a higher education incubator for drawing in young people, and 2, a technology incubator for keeping young persons in the city as potential residents? I know there are some elements that are in place now, but are there additional ones to help make this happen?
So if you don't mind, I'll actually answer this question not with my city council hat, but my day job, actually. Education obviously been a big need in the community. For many, many years, we had the Dixon University Center, which was kind of a hub for regional universities to have classes to operate out of. I actually work for Harrisburg University. We're very STEM focused, and they've been growing by leaps and bounds and growing the undergraduate population. In fact, they've increased, I think, their undergraduate population from 300 students, I think, 4 years ago to now over 800. We have actually over 4,000 graduate students that come in to the city. So it really has increased the focus of education, particularly in a technology-related area. The university also has partnered with like a technology incubation to work with startup firms, giving them a house under the university to have resources and additional help to grow, which, again, wearing my university hat, is really hoping to grow that tech sector from an employment opportunity right here in the city. Putting my city council hat back on, if you allow me to do so, I think one of the things that we need to look at when we talk about economic development and when we talk about the role that we all play in creating an environment for businesses to come into the city, it has to be connected to education, because the two are obviously have to have some degree of working together to make that happen. So I think it's actually an exciting time in the city of Harrisburg's history with how vibrant it is from an education opportunity standpoint, and I think it just needs to continue to grow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question.
How y'all doing? My name is Sean King.
How you doing?
I've been waiting to ask these questions for a minute. Like our DCP, like
Dauphin County Prison.
exactly, Dauphin County Prison. Like inmates and COs got two different handbooks. A lot of people get abused in situations like that because of the handbooks, following rules that's not even in other books and stuff like that. I gotta address that. But then you got families, you know what I mean, that's on welfare and things like that, that's sitting there paying for stuff like construction paper, glue, Lysol wipes, stuff like that for the schools. And they send their kids to charter school because they ain't got it like that. But then they send it to the school and they got to pay for it. But then you got another kid going to Catholic school, they got everything they need for real. Like, y'all not looking out for the city for real. Y'all talking about flipping money for 2nd Street, which way 2nd Street going. Who cares about that? For real, who cares? The traffic been going the same way for years. Invest your money into the city. Y'all got all the major shows like Kevin Hart, Dave Chappelle going out Hershey. Y'all got the whole Farm Show Arena. That can bring so much money into the city, y'all crazy. 2nd Street lit up. Y'all got so many DJs that's in tune with the hip hop scene that can bring so much money into the city, and y'all not doing it. Y'all can address those issues, or go ahead and keep on screaming broke. That's talking to the mayor. That's talking to anybody on the council seats. I got so many issues to address, it's crazy. But I've been drinking, so think about those ones.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up relative to Dauphin County Prison, as I mentioned at the top of the program, these forums are going to be a series of forums, and we're going to meet with different officials in the county. One of the folks that we will be meeting with is Dauphin County Prison does have a new warden, a gentleman by the name of Brian Clark from Adams County, very progressive in his thinking. So we will be convening a forum with the new warden, and we can certainly touch on that. We'll make sure if you put your name on if you signed up, we'll make sure we send that out to you. But thank you for your question.
And one more issue, the age bracket between 15 and say 26. Y'all need something to occupy their time during the daytime, man. It's too much free time for them. Y'all ain't got nothing to do. If y'all got it, y'all not promoting it.
We got a bunch of things to get there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cornelius wants to address it for you.
Yeah, just touch on a couple things. I know you mentioned about DCP, that's more Dauphin County, and I guess if we're going to reference, those are the people who kind of control the prison, and they have the board and they make those decisions. As far as the school district and the kids, so a lot of times, and that's the biggest understanding of trying to understand how everything works in Harrisburg. So we as the city, we have no control over the school district. So, but I would say within the school district, there are programs that help support families that are in need. And I think, I want to hear you. I can't hear you. That's why. Y'all don't promote them. Families don't know about them. And I mean, I think that touches on a bigger standpoint of communication within the city. There's a lot of good programs. There are a lot of resources that people aren't aware about it. And one of the initiatives that started towards the middle of last year that hope to kind of relaunch again this year is kind of centralizing different things that are happening in the city, whether it's with the school district, Dauphin County, city of Harrisburg, into a centralized place so people can get their information. So right now, I know we kind of started off a kind of community calendar and a community resources page where people can kind of come to the city of Harrisburg's website and be connected to the different resources that are outside of the city's capacity. Because a lot of people don't know about the programs that the school district may have, or what the Y may have, or what the Boys and Girls Club may have. So there are things to keep those kids between 15 and 26 busy. But if we're not kind of feeding that information and looking from a citywide communication plan of how to get that to the people, it means nothing. So I know at our next meeting, our next workshop session in February, one of the things that we did ask from the administration is more of a 2018 comprehensive communication plan to kind of figure out how to streamline communication so people know what's going on in the city.
Thank you. Thank you. Listen, we are kind of running into a time issue. We're coming to the end of the program, and there's so many people here who want to ask a question, so I'm going to let these guys ask a question, but I ask you guys to keep it really short if you can and not go into a long thing.
And if you can't as well, I'm sure a few members, I don't know about the mayor's schedule, afterwards you may be able to get a one-on-one. But like I said, any questions that aren't answered, or we'll make sure you get a definitive answer. But in the spirit of time, we are at the hour-and-a-half mark, so please keep your questions brief. I would say the same to our panel in response.
Follow-up, right, to this meeting.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Victoria McCallum, and I am a transplant resident. I've been in Harrisburg 4 years, and it was the best decision I could have made for myself.
Good to hear.
Thank you.
So last month, I had the opportunity to attend the Diversity Coalition brunch that I believe a member of your administration held, and a representative at that meeting has stated that state and government contracts, 30% of them are supposed to be allocated to minority-owned businesses, but at this time, only 7% are. So my question would be, how would minority-owned businesses know about those contracting opportunities? And if they are to get certified, how do they do that? And where are those resources located or listed? And if there is an incentive for businesses and organizations to hire minority-owned businesses.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
We can all do this jointly. I'll say, so do you have your own business?
Yes.
Okay, so the city, first thing we would do would encourage you to register your business with the city. The city does keep a list. If you go to the city website and you type in, I think, minority-owned businesses or along that, it'll come up with the list because I just pulled it a couple days ago to see how up-to-date it looked. That list is then, it's incumbent on us to make sure that that list is circulated to people that are looking to do projects in Harrisburg. And I think we can do a better job of that, but we are working, and we do have a list. Now, the city has goals. The city the city has goals, certain percentage goals, like you've referenced. But also when we select, when we put projects out to bid, we will put goals in those bid packets that will correlate to scoring, and people can potentially be chosen based on how they're addressing those goals. So you asked, is there a benefit to being certified or to being a minority-owned business or women-owned business in your case, and the answer is yes. So it's part of a longer answer, but let's start with getting you registered with the city. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Where is that located?
Like, what is the website?
On the website?
Yeah, you can find the list on the website, and you can also, I think you possibly met Shashawn at the diversity brunch. He was the city representative who was there, and anyone can, if you reach out to the city, we can get you on the list.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, good evening, my fellow Americans and citizens of the city of Harrisburg. My name is Anthony Harrell. Now the questions that I have is, several months ago when there was a few incidents down in the downtown area, the mayor met with some of the owners of some of the establishments, and they came together, and there was law enforcement everywhere. Like I said, the guy was saying about the 2nd Street area being all blocked off, and all that was going on, taking care of that area up there. Now you have the south, uptown, all the rest of the areas. They're under siege by drugs and crime, and people are killing each other, getting killed every other day. No one's trying to be coming to their aid. I mean, there's helicopters flying around when certain areas is in trouble. But what constituents want to know is they're very afraid. They can't even come outside their homes, or they're scared to be on the streets. The question they want to know is, What are you doing about the crime and illegal drugs and guns that are running through the city of Harrisburg?
Thank you.
I'll say one of the initiatives that the police have had over the past year has been to try and focus on taking guns over the street, off the street. A lot of the crime that we see, especially the violent crime, is tied to the traffic in illegally procured weapons. And over the past year, the Harrisburg police have taken over 300 guns off the street, which is a lot more than they have in previous years. That's one of Chief's focus. I think it has had some effect in keeping the homicide rate where it is, which is still too high. But we didn't see an explosion as other municipalities have, whether it be York or even the surrounding municipalities, Swedera, Lower Paxton, et cetera. So that's part of it. The larger issue of how do we address crime, as you saw with the recent tragic shooting death of the Deputy U.S. Marshal, the city does do a lot of cooperative police work with all the various agencies, whether it be the state police or the U.S. Marshal's office or the Capitol Police. That's one of the ways that they proactively are working. The Attorney General's office, the Drug Task Force. So there's a lot of focus. The root cause of the violence that we're seeing and the escalation that we're seeing in Harrisburg has to do with the drug trade and the opioid epidemic. I think there's no question about it. That requires a broad-ranging focus that is more than just the cities. It requires county and state and federal, all focusing on the root cause.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, guys. I'm just holding this place for him, but I do have to tell you this. When I look at this stage, it gives me hope. Because I do remember when city council meetings were like Jerry Springer and Saturday Night Live. So good job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Oh, yeah, my name is Ron Johnson, and I think that we needed some representation from the hilltop communities, which is anything above the South 18th and Dairy Street line, all the way out to South 29th Street. And the first question I have is, who is the new chair of the Public Safety Committee? Because I'm gonna need to know that.
That would be Asha Green.
Okay. And the second part is, what can we do to keep and make the property owners safe and want to stay in the hilltop communities in which these investment properties are tearing away the very fabric and fiber of our communities? People are trying to bail. My phone been ringing off the hook from every community on the hilltop.
I mean, it's a combination of not only enforcing codes that are on the book as far as keeping up with their property, and there's also more enforcement of, I know you're aware of this, but this is for general information for everyone else. We do have where people are renters, where it's almost like a 3-strike type of rule. But what that takes is 3 convictions from the district justice. But the key thing, in hopes of seeing it now with our codes department being at full staff, which has never been in the past, I would say 3-4 years, more code enforcement of the current codes on the books.
Well, this is our whole problem. These people that are investing in these properties in the city, they don't even live in the state. They don't have no real ties to our community. I've been doing this for over a decade. And you know, I just get the community straightened out, and now we getting pushed backwards because the city's open for business, but not in a good way, especially for the residents that own property in the city.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I guess the other key portion of that too, and I've kind of touched on it again, is we have a lot of city residents who live here their whole entire lives but don't own property here. So we have to increase the home ownership amongst city residents. It's a lot cheaper to own than it is to rent.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Mr. Johnson, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Butts, Louis Butts. This is to the mayor. You do have an economic development person on staff. We have brownfields along Her Street. Jobs is the issue. We got to create jobs. And I don't know if that person jockeys for industrial jobs, high-tech jobs, for our Paxton Street Creek area along Cameron Street. there's a factory, there's areas that you can jockey and get vulva, big companies coming, because 2,500 jobs in Harrisburg would really put a damper, really slice our unemployment. It's bringing jobs. Get somebody who you can hire that can jockey for jobs so we can bring industry to Harrisburg. That's your job. Who is there in your administration that can bring companies in? If they can't bring the companies in to bring the jobs, I don't think they need to be there.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Most of these people come is talking about jobs.
Let him answer. Thank you, Mr. Butts.
I'll be brief and give you a general answer, which might surprise you, which is that there are, especially if we're talking about manufacturing jobs or warehousing or distribution jobs, there are that is one sector of the regional economy which is really growing. And I was just at a resource fair.
I'm talking about regional. I'm talking about the city of Harrisburg. Not regional.
Well, we have to think regionally. I think that's part of the problem.
We actually have to think regional because we have enough space within our city that we can bring industry in, which would be in walking distance of our residents, so they can have those jobs, get those houses, and balance our economy like that.
Okay.
That's how it should
Hey,
be.
Mr. Butts, you let him finish first, and if he doesn't satisfactorily answer that, you can sidebar with him afterwards.
I may
It's the
not
spirit
be
of
able
time.
to satisfactorily answer that, but I will say that there are thousands of warehouse jobs that pay $12 an hour and up. I was just at the job fair for Puerto Rican refugees this afternoon. A lot of the businesses were there. They can't hire enough people. So part of what we've been trying to do is connect Harrisburg residents, working with CAT to make sure transportation is provided to those jobs. Another sector which is incredibly strong and can't hire enough people is nursing and the health sciences fields. So there are jobs. Part of the goal is to connect people to those jobs, and I think we're working at that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And before you go to the next question, I have to make one plug here before we lose anyone else. On your way out, the United Way, we're talking about jobs, and obviously a lot of us are privileged and blessed to have a job, but there are some folks that are in need, especially during these winter months. So on that the resource table on your way out, the United Way is having a sock and undergarment drive. Please take one of those flyers and donate to the extent that you can.
Thank you.
Thanks. Three quick things. Thank you very much for coming, particularly particularly the council people. It's just, I mean, really, you get paid almost nothing. It's a part-time job, and I see you all over the city all the time, and it makes a big difference. Okay, so just, okay. Two, you mentioned something about a bridge towards Hack. Could you tell the audience, because I sort of know but don't know, what part of Industrial Road and Hack, if any, are in the city? Hack is in the city too? Okay, and all of Industrial Road with all those businesses are in the city? Yeah, and I don't know if people know that. Okay, but here's my real question, which is, have we had any serious discussions with any of the neighboring municipality in the last several years about merging with them? That's my question.
Thank you.
Sir.
So, without getting overtly political in that type of question, Pennsylvania is a really interesting state in that it puts a lot of deference to local government control. So, the process of any type of merger, it takes a lot to be able to make that happen. I would say, as someone who was from another state and moved into the state, I find it kind of archaic, the lack of regionalization that occurs in this area. I mean, if you think about it, think about the disparity among school districts. Think about the thing, like these are real issues that go on. I can't speak to the history, but there's a lot of resistance to the concept of working together as a region. And I'm not sure that I think I know part of it, but I think the reality is that we have to start functioning not just as a city, but as a region. I will give you an example. When I was doing some studying even before I came on to council, if you want to look at a similar MSA in this country to the Harrisburg region, does anyone know what it would be? Austin, Texas. when you think about it, do you think of us and Austin in the same plane? No, but we should. Because the reality is the economic power that this region has rivals that of the city of Austin, Texas. So again, long story short, I think, yes, as leaders in our community, we would always welcome the opportunity to be able to discuss how we can partner to make our region stronger. I hope that you start seeing that happen, you know, in reciprocity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So is that no discussion?
Nothing formal that ever happened, but I would always be open to it, honestly.
There have been boundary discussions. One of which had to do with the state hospital grounds, which seemed like a real opportunity potentially. But Ben explained the basically in order for any type of merger to happen, it would require an affirmative vote of the majority of citizens of both municipalities. And there is very little likelihood of probably that happen. On the services side, that's where you have seen some consolidation and regionalization, and there's more of that which can come. In terms of actual geographic boundaries, it's a big lift.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Isha Mobley. I work for Nasir Consulting Group's a drug and alcohol treatment facility on 2nd and Riley. I'm also the community liaison for Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church on 6th Street. So I come on behalf of the community and my clients. You spoke about CAT transportation. Thank you for some of the increases that have been made, but we need more. My clients, they begged me to come and on behalf of them. We need increased routes more often. We need them to be later in the evening because people work that third shift. There's no routes. If you go across the river at certain times of the day, you're stranded in the middle of the day until later in the evening. And then since we don't honor blue laws, why don't we have a Sunday route? The people who we go to eat out, when we go eat out, we go to the mall, those are my clients. They need rides. They have to figure out how they're going to get to work, paying exorbitant amounts to other people to get rides. So that's what I'm coming on behalf of. What can we do to increase our CAT routes?
Thank you.
So I don't know if you were at the meeting today. They actually had a bus optimization study. So I'm actually putting a plug out for that. So they had a meeting this afternoon at Strawberry Square, and then they had another meeting this evening. I believe it was from I think it started at 6:30, 4:30 to 6:30, around 6:30. Yeah. So that was at the Harrisburg Transportation Center, where they were talking about optimizing bus routes. Now the transportation conversation is a bigger conversation in itself because, as you know, Harrisburg is part of CAT, which is encompasses of Dauphin County, Cumberland County, and the city of Harrisburg. So recently, CAT will be under new management starting in February, which will be the Rapid Transit. So one of the things that's been big, and this just piggybacks on the last conversation, had to talk about regionalization, about really trying to truly optimize routes that moves in the way that benefits residents. So I think it's very, very imperative, not only from a council standpoint, but from a community standpoint, that we are paying attention to the conversations that are being had. Because if we're not part of that conversation, then we will get left out. But as far as the CAT structure from a long-term perspective is not going to last. So there has to be a greater conversation of how do we make that more optimal for our area to make sure that we're ensuring reliant transportation for our residents within the city of Harrisburg, but also to different parts of the region.
How can we find out when those conversations are being had so I can...
No conversation. I would attend your local... I don't know exactly when the CAT board meeting is, but their information is right on the CAT website. But I would encourage you, it's on my Facebook page, I don't have the actual link, to take the bus optimization study. So if you weren't able to attend the meeting today, they do have an online survey where they're focusing on the main routes. I think it's Derry Street, 6th Street, 7th Street, Market Street, and I think there's 2 more other major streets where they're looking at bus stops, they're looking at shelter, they're looking at basically ridership and their opinion of how to optimize those bus routes.
And just to piggyback off of that too, if you haven't had a chance to sign up on our listserv, please do. Those of you that have social media, or if you're on Facebook, please add the Capital Region Concerned Citizens page. Certainly, we will put out any and all information that has to do with the Capital Region. So if you're not able to find it on their website, you certainly can find it either on our social media, or you'll receive an email to that end through our listserv. And we are, good.
I just had one thing to add. I work for United Way during the day, and there's a nonprofit for almost literally everything. So there are a series of nonprofits that do offer rides for people. So afterwards, we can connect and give you my information, and we can talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and now for our final public question of the evening. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, Winnie Okello. I start with a comment and then a question. So my first comment is definitely to support the whole idea of the fact that we need a greater focus on the human factors of the engineering and implementation and planning that goes into the whole connectivity, as far as where we have our urban areas of commerce and the people who are trying to get to those jobs or create those jobs. So I definitely support that. But my question relates to your capital improvement plan, as far as, is there a prioritization of the more urgent needs, whether in terms of infrastructure or services to the community? There. Thank you.
Thank you.
So within our last budget, there's kind of, this was the first year we actually passed like an official capital improvement plan. So basically, as from council administration standpoint, it's broken down by departments. So you have like your administration needs, which is like IT and things that the city needs to function. You have public works. So when we're talking about public works, one of the main things that a lot of people don't realize is public works doesn't even have a building that they actually own. So as far as that was a priority. As far as road projects, that's prioritized. We do the same thing for public safety. So it is public record, and one of the things I try to do when we're going through the budgeting cycle is to kind of let people know, hey, this is the proposed budget, this is the capital improvement plan. What are your thoughts as far as prioritizing needs? We know the needs as far as blight. So there was a reinvestment of trying to add more money to demo more homes. We know there's a need as far as roads and potholes. So we bought necessary equipment to supply our demo team, but also to supply our public works as far as their trash equipment, their loaders, their ability to do road projects, and I think Wes can speak more on that. So we are prioritizing the equipment necessary to get certain city services done that you guys are paying for with your tax dollars. But every year, from now on, there will be a capital improvement plan. So while we're going through the budgeting process, I think it's very, very imperative to weigh in as citizens to kind of say, hey, this is important, this is what's going on in my streets. I know within that plan too, it's kind of prioritization of housing that's going to be demoed. There was a prioritization of even alleyways. If you ride through city alleyways, there's a lot of potholes that are crazy in the alleyways. So that was one of the topics of buying the necessary equipment to do the appropriate patchwork in those alleyways, but also paving those alleyways as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right.
One more question. Hey, hi guys. So my name's Carrie Fowler, and I represent an forgotten population in the city, people with disabilities. So I hear you're talking about ordinances and investing into the city and properties. What about investing into making the city more accessible for people with disabilities? They can't come over into the city. They can't enjoy Capona. They can't even walk in downtown. They can't transport themselves safely in downtown Harrisburg. I appreciate that you did include the curb cuts for the 3rd Street renovations, but I've been trying to get an appointment with Nelva Wright since Thanksgiving and still can't meet with her to discuss those types of things. So that's what I would like to know. What are you doing to make this city more accessible for the forgotten population?
Well, so for every public works project that we are doing, we do incorporate making sure that there are curb cuts in every intersection is ADA compliant as projects come up. We do understand that we've had some issues with ADA compliance in the city's history, but as we're moving forward, every project that we do will have ADA compliance, and we will work with Ms. Wright to get that meeting scheduled for you. But like I said, moving forward, every project that we do, 3rd Street, we're working on Her Street as well, and Berry Street intersection. For every project we do, there will be ADA curb cuts as a part of it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, and this concludes this evening's forum. Give yourselves a round of applause. You guys certainly, it's a moderately unseasonable weather out there, so you certainly could have been anywhere other than here. Also, give our panelists a round of applause as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and City Council.
As was mentioned, the purpose of this event is to not only grant access to your local elected officials, but also conversely, grant them access to you as well. So I want to thank all of our panelists for your time, your insight, and we wish you guys safe travels. And feel free to sidebar with any of our panelists afterwards. Thank you.